In this video, we're going to engage the future active indicative forms and meanings of Koine Greek verbs. These are largely built on or based on present active indicative verbs, which we talked about in a previous video. If you have not watched that video, I encourage you to go back and watch that one first, because what we're going to do here is going to go ahead and build on what we learned with respect to the present active indicative. You may have heard that Greek is a highly inflected language. That is to say, it changes elements of specific words to indicate information about that particular word. It can change single words rather than having to add additional words to give us information. Whereas in English, we have to add a pronoun to indicate who is doing the action or to whom the action is happening. Greek can indicate that information in a single verb by changing the form of the verb. And we're going to see that at play with respect to the future tense. Whereas in English, we often add the word will to indicate the future tense, that the action happens in future time. Greek makes a slight change to an individual word to indicate that it's future time, rather than adding an additional word that is a signal to the future. So we've seen this table before, and we're going to see it again with respect to present time. We talked about how the action can be either simple, I loosen, I teach, the action viewed as a whole at sort of one point in present time, or as ongoing in present time. I am teaching, I am loosening. The action is ongoing during the period of the present time. The same is true of the future. The same form of the future in the case of our standard sample verb, luo in Greek, we get a sigma stuck in there to indicate the future, which we'll talk about in just a moment here. But the kind of action, whether it be ongoing, I will be loosening, or I will be teaching, the action will be ongoing over a period of time, or it will be simple. I will loosen, or I will teach, the action viewed as a whole. So both the future and the present can have ongoing or simple action, and the exact same form will be used of the verb. So it's up to us as the translator and interpreter to determine whether we want to indicate the action of that particular verb as ongoing or as simple in form. So in the present active indicative, we have the endings changing to indicate person and number, either with respect to continuous action in present time or simple action in present time. When we come to the future active indicative, we have the same thing going on. We have future time, so our time changes with the future tense into things that will happen in the future rather than are happening in the present. So I will be releasing, or I will be loosing, or I will release, or I will loose when the action is viewed as simple. As to their formation, we're going to see a little bit of a difference with respect to the way that the future happens as well. And it's only a slight small difference. One single letter indicates the difference between a future and a present. So whereas the present active indicative is built on the stem with a connecting vowel and the primary active endings or suffixes, and as we saw in our last video, oftentimes these are sort of smushed together, the connecting vowel and the primary active endings. The future is going to do a very similar thing. It's going to use the stem, the connecting vowel, and the primary active endings, but it is also going to throw a sigma in there. The letter sigma, roughly equivalent to the English S. It's going to put it between the stem and the connecting vowel to indicate that this action, this verb, is future in time. So when we're talking about the future active indicative, that future part is the tense. The active part is the voice. The subject is doing the action themselves. And the indicative is the mood. In the indicative mood, the action is viewed as real. It's really happening, in this case, in future time, or it will really happen in future time. That sigma that we just talked about is our sign to the future. You can think of that sigma stuck in there as equivalent to the English will. And so this looks like this when we come to our paradigm for the future active indicative of luo, a omega conjugation verb. So you see here that sigma is stuck in there, so that we have luso, luseis, lusei, lusamen, luseti, lususi when it comes to these different forms. The trouble is that sometimes sigma does not like to play well with other letters, and particularly with other consonants. So what happens is that we get something called amalgamation, where letters will change as a result of the combination of that particular letter plus a sigma. And so these are our rules for how the changes happen with respect to amalgamation. So when a P, a beta, or a phi, when a sigma, is added to a P, a beta, or a phi, you get a pasi. So you can see here, pimp is the root of the verb pimpo, I send. So when you add that sigma to the stem, to the end of the stem, that P and that sigma are going to amalgamate, or they're going to combine to make that ps sound, to make the psi. So you can still sort of hear that sigma in there, but you don't see it in there. The visualization of the sigma is lost. So pimpso is I will send, just as luso is I will loosen, but the sigma is sort of embedded in that letter there. So then when it comes to a sigma being added to a kappa, a gamma, or a chi, you're going to get an xi. So ago, the verb for I lead in the present active indicative, when that sigma is added to the gamma of the stem, it's going to go to oxo. So once again, you can hear the sigma in there, but you can't see the visualization of the sigma in there. And then perhaps the most confusing one is this third kind of amalgamation, when a sigma is added to a tau, a delta, or a theta. The sigma is still there, but the end of the root drops out. So you sort of have to recognize when you are learning your vocabulary, you learn it with that letter on there, but then when a sigma is added, that letter drops out, and you sort of have to remember that this is a future tense verb. I know that because of the sigma there, and something must have dropped out because I don't recognize the root. Something is missing. So in the case of patho, I will trust or persuade, when you have that sigma added to the theta at the end of the stem, the theta is going to drop out, so you just get peso. And then the last one here is, this last note here is related to this. Words that have a zeta in the present actually have a delta in their stem. So, for example, the verb baptizo, which looks like this in the present active indicative first person singular, that zeta there is actually sort of a delta hiding in there. So what you're going to get is baptizo for the future, when that sigma is added in. So you can sort of think of almost like a delta slash zeta being a part of this rule here. So what I want us to do here is practice some Greek math letter problems. And what we're going to do is start with the harder part, and then we're going to sort of ease our way in, put some helps in there. So on your whiteboard, see if you can determine, without the amalgamation rules up there, without looking back to the amalgamation rules, make a guess here. It's helpful for our learning to make a guess. Even if it's wrong and we correct it, we're more likely to learn a thing if we make a guess without leaning on helps. So first, make a guess with respect to what these combinations would look like. Do the letter math here, write them out, and then after you do that, after you've paused and do that, I'll put up onto the screen our different amalgamation combinations, and then you can sort of self-correct from there, and then after that, I'll come in with our proper answer. So go ahead and pause here. I'll wait for you, and go ahead and do these little letter problems. All right, so here is the slight bit of help, telling us our different amalgamation combinations. So once again, go ahead and pause, take a look at your whiteboard, make any corrections you might need to make based on this information, and I'll come back on with the proper combinations of each one. All right, this is what these should look like. You'll notice down here, we'll get to this one. This one is the most tricky, the most complicated. Ago, that gamma with the sigma added is going to go to a xi, so we get oxo. Peso, that theta is going to drop out with the addition of the sigma. The P and the sigma are going to make that psi, so pimpso for the first person singular future active indicative of pimpo. Blepso, same combination there. This one's perhaps the easiest one. There is no amalgamation, just simply the sigma added in there. And then if you wrote didoxo, you can notice how that's hard to say, didoxo, you would be right to think that based on the information that I have provided you. But the actual future is going to be didoxo. And the reason for that is that pronunciation issue. The S sound embedded in both of these letters, the sigma and the xi, is difficult to say. And so that sigma drops out there as well. So as I said earlier, sigma doesn't necessarily play well with all letters and sometimes is shy and just sort of goes away because we don't want that repetition of the sound. So this one would actually be didoxo, but you are much forgiven if you have this one right here. So let's go ahead and one more time, we're going to go in for a high five. I'm going to come in full screen here for you, and let's go high five. 1, 2, 3, boom. Way to go. Great work. How I want to end here is with, let's get that full screen. How I want to end here is by going through some parsing practice. And because I'm a good and gracious professor, I have given you from the get-go the parsing helps here. So we're not going to do the most difficult step. First, I'm going to ask you to parse with your helps over here. So remember, with respect to parsing information, we're looking for tense, voice, mood, person, and number. At this point in our Greek journey, voice and mood are not going to change. We've only learned the active and the indicative. We might get a change with tense. We've learned the present and the future tense so far. So those are your two options with respect to tense. And then with respect to person, you've got first person, second person, third person. And with respect to number, you have singular or plural. So go ahead and pause here, write down the parsing information for these three different verbs, and I'll come back on and give you the correct parsing information so you can check yourself. All right, your parsing should look something like this. For luo, we have our most basic form, the most basic form of the verb that we can possibly get with our base verb. That's going to be our example throughout our Greek journey. We've got present, active, indicative, first person singular. So we're over here with respect to those primary suffixes, first person singular, from the verb luo. So this is what's called the lexical form, the form that you would find in a dictionary or a vocabulary list. Luusi, without the nu there at the end, presuming that the next word would begin with a consonant. If it were to begin, the next word were to begin with a vowel, we would get the movable nu, as we do in our next parsing problem here. But here we have a present, active, indicative, third person plural. So we're down here in the usi, usin, plural ending in the third person, once again from the lexical form of luo. Lususin, we have one little letter added in there. Our sigma indicates that we are not in the present tense, we are in the future tense. So whereas this will be they are loosening or they loosen, whether the action is continuous or simple in present time. This one is going to be future, but same third person plural, active indicative from luo. So they will loosen or they will be loosening. The first of those, they will loosen. Simple action, they will be loosening, ongoing action in future time. So the key to the sigma there is future time, equivalent to our English will. Asin is going to be no longer from luo, so we've gone to a different lexical form. This is going to be the to be verb, a me. And when we are dealing with to be verbs, we don't have voice. To be verbs don't have active, middle, or passive. And so here we just have the present indicative, third person plural, right down here, asin, from the lexical form a me. And lastly here, the closing out grapsomen, we have a sigma hiding there in that P. So we have the combination of P plus sigma equaling P. So we are in the future active indicative, and we're going to be right up here with the min, the first person plural, from the lexical form grapho. So this lexical form is I write in the present active indicative, but the future active indicative of grapsomen would be we will write in the simple action, or we will be writing for continuous action. So one more time, let's go in for our final high five for all of your great work and all of your great practice in this video. 1, 2, 3, boom. Way to go. So proud of you.